That pilot.
Co-pilot status, please.
50 meters altitude, showing pretty steady on Sirius. 2255 depth.
All right, got a strange looking fish, just went by.
Descending at 20 meters a minute.
Okay, I think let's get down to that.
12 meters on your aft side, there's a
yeah.
huge target.
Yeah, sonar. Keep an eye on sonar for me.
And at the top of the spires at 2292, guys. So then if you, there we go. There's a
Okay, I'm
hillside.
gonna drive south a little ways. Coming around to the east. And up this hill, where I hope to find you at the top.
Yeah, you should be coming into, I can see your light pool now on the bottom right.
Well, this is just a big pillar right here.
Pilot, this is watch leader, so you know the depth of the top of the chimney is 2292.
Copy that. Thank you, watch lead.
And that should be an unambiguous. There's only one thing that's that shallow. So here we are. We're at 2294 meters water depth at the bottom of the ocean on the Mid-Cayman Rise. We are on a heading of 043 degrees. We're facing northeast, facing it into a tall sulfide chimney covered in shrimp, which we're pretty sure is the central spire that we saw yesterday. So we must be just on the southwest side of this feature. That blows that theory. Yesterday we only saw one feature that was this shallow. Let's have another look at that. According to the depth, that should be the only game in town.
So I'm behind and to your right.
Yep.
Okay. Just gonna look down at this thing as I pass over it.
You're directly behind me now. If you turn right, you'll come straight up. Push ahead, there you are.
There's some more
So I'm looking straight down, Dave.
roger that. Okay, I'm gonna push way out to get the tether away from that feature.
Okay, I'm gonna come down a little bit while you do that.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna follow you.
Well, let me get on the spire.
Okay.
Because it's basically right here.
I'll check with the guys in Rhode Island on the chat room
Okay,
to find
there's
out.
the lower vent there. I'm gonna drive up to the top.
Very good, thanks.
Ooh. It's not really enough delta. You got any more down tilt? No, you don't have any more down tilt.
No, I'm straight down. You're right underneath me. My altitude is between 16 and 20.
Right.
You want me to follow you, Dave?
Yeah, we're gonna go south from here, but which side do I want to be on is the question. There you go. Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to set myself right over the top.
So when I make a move, it's going to be 75 meters, 180.
Okay.
So when you're ready, I can call that in. I just saw Jeff.
Just hold off a minute, video.
I just came up 5.
Thank you.
It's funny, it's amazing how different a thing can look at when you come at it just from a different direction at the bottom of the ocean. When we came up on this sulfide just now from the southwest, I was concerned that we'd found a different chimney.
Yeah,
we'd
really
missed
get
completely
blown up
yesterday,
in the plume
Mm.
here.
and
Yeah.
it's just the different appearance.
What's our
So we're in the
temperature?
plume. Our temperature is 7 degrees Celsius compared to 4 degrees is
Wow.
background here.
Yeah.
Dave, your temperature is about 8 degrees Celsius.
Right, thank you. Okay, we need a fix on Little Herc. Drop a target for Little Herc as top of spire.
Right.
Can we get a number for that waypoint, please?
Oops.
Almost full down to hold me here.
Nav, can we make that a proper waypoint?
Yes. We'll make that 15.
Very good, thank you.
Alright, and turning south, you can call in the move.
Nav, a quick check.
Can
we believe
you
we already dropped
turn
waypoint 15 yesterday.
left?
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry about
Turn
that.
left.
If we make this 16
Thanks.
to be unambiguous.
16 is your current count.
And you can come south as well, Jeff.
So I'm going to call in the
I'll
ship
follow
move
you.
right now.
We're both pointed west right now.
Yeah.
Bridge
Turning
ROV
south.
nav.
Go ahead.
Yes, can we call in a ship move, excuse me, 180 degrees, 75 meters at 0.2 knots.
All right.
Okay, so we're starting off on our continuation of our survey around the Von Damm hydrothermal field. To orientate ourselves today, we've started off by going straight to the top of the same spire. So we've been able to drop a waypoint there, which is basically the same location as waypoint 001 from dive 1. And today we're calling that waypoint 16. So that will
Okay.
allow us to converge the navigation from the 2 files later in the cruise. Now we've got ourselves oriented.
Get out ahead a
We
little
are
bit
heading
here.
75 meters due south, out over the areas that we surveyed yesterday. And what we're going to do now is continue our survey around the perimeter and expanding outwards, which is unfinished business from dive 01,
Look behind me.
to make sure we understand the full extent
Pretty
of
steep.
the area.
Pretty treacherous stuff.
Yep.
Check your...
I got to take a look down right now.
Yep, yep, yep.
And as you can imagine, over such rough terrain with 2 different vehicles on a tether in between, going downhill is one of the trickiest things that we ask these guys to do.
Okay.
Okay, Dave.
So that would be
Looks clear in front of me.
Okay, I've got a little...
Something right there.
Yeah, that's right behind me.
So that would...
No, that's actually not right behind me, but there's something else right behind me. But
Okay. Well, you're 12 below me right now,
Yeah.
indicated, and I'm 14 off the bottom, so I'm feeling okay.
all right. Great, googly moogly. So I'm beginning to think the way to do this is to back down. I'm going to turn around. have a look here.
Okay. So yeah.
So for those of you, what's happening here is because we're trying to head south, but we're going downhill the whole way. What the pilot's just doing now is spinning the ROV around so it's facing north.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Then it's facing into the cliff face, and then what it can do is
Yeah.
reverse
Okay.
downhill so it can keep the steep terrain in sight.
Okay.
It's not the most elegant way to do
I'm
things,
gonna
but
hang
it's
here
not the
to
most
you
elegant thing
get
we're asking them to
close,
deal
and
with.
then
Okay. My camera angle's 60 degrees, so
yeah.
you're not stretched out too far.
Yeah, I need to go backwards down this so I can maintain clearance and
Well,
keep my tether away.
have a good time.
And as you can imagine, over such rough terrain with two different vehicles and a tether in between, going downhill is one of the trickiest things that we ask these guys to do.
Okay.
Okay, Dave.
So that would be
Looks clear in front of me.
Okay, I've got a little
something right there.
Yeah, that's right behind me.
So that would.
No, that's actually not right behind me, but there's something else right behind me. But
Okay. Well, you're 12 below me right now,
Yeah.
indicated, and I'm 14 off the bottom, so I'm feeling okay.
all right. Great, googly moogly. So I'm beginning to think the way to do this is to back down. I'm going to turn around, have a look here.
Okay.
A lot of particulate material in the water column here today. I don't really remember that from yesterday, but that may just be because it was at the start of the dive and it got less as we went on through the dive.
So, Chris.
Who's calling me? Yep, Chris here.
Yeah, we have another active vent here that's due south of the main feature as we came down the hill. I don't know if we've been here before. We're close to a target called 002, and there's also a target 0016 in the neighborhood. So
Okay.
I don't know if this is a repeat or not.
Well, a question for Nav. What was the difference between waypoint 001 yesterday and waypoint 16 that we dropped today?
That difference is about 20 meters and 225. So that's our offset, our navigation offset.
Okay, within that error, I would guess this is pretty much the same place. I doubt if it's something new.
Okay, moving on.
Yep, so you guys know, I mean, our main priority is just to get far enough south to start the line. The first line we care about today is going to be the eastbound line at the end of this survey. So
Roger that.
if it's easier just to fly through the water and makes your life easier to get us started, that's fine by me.
Okay.
Chris, we're getting quite away from the centre of the main vent. We're finding small patches of vent. I think we should waypoint each one because I think they're going to be slightly rarer this far out.
And we have
need to
another
know where
vent.
they are.
We heard you.
Okay, so we're seeing a little patch of shrimp here. We're quite a lot further south than we've been before. So, navigator, can we drop a waypoint here, please?
Okay.
ROV nav bridge, ships all stop.
Thank you.
And this is a small patch of shrimp, no any obvious diffuse flow associated with it. We're at a depth of 2332 meters on the ROV. We're on a heading of 40043 degrees, facing northeast
Hey,
into the
Rolly,
wall.
you can run in and get a white balance on those shrimp if you like.
Everybody, ship all stop.
And the ship has just finished its move, so we're at the southernmost line. So this is what we were thinking was going to define the southernmost extremity to the Von Damm field, and clearly we're not into background yet. There's still more to be found. What you could see there when you zoomed in was
That's
a
better than nothing. Thanks for trying.
what you saw when we zoomed right in there was
Direction
dark
and
grey
next move,
material.
Nav.
That would be about 90, about 50 meters.
So yeah,
Okay,
what I'm
I'll
saying is
bring
we
my
have
head east.
angular boulders here that are
Are you ready to make another move?
I'm just getting set
Okay.
up.
a lot of brown material,
Sirius is probably going to drift for
yellowish
another.
material like weathered
Couple
sulfides,
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I'll work this
Yeah,
spot.
so I'm going to
but
put,
with
we have a
fluid
little
all
bit
over
of
the
an
top of that.
offset, which is roughly about there. So you're roughly here. So I'm going to let Sirius drop.
Okay.
And then
For those biologists that are interested, look very carefully at the dorsal organ and look at the quite distinctive shape compared to Rimicaris exoculata that's found in the North Atlantic. They're distinctly different.
Sure. Well, of course, um, we're leaping to assumptions based on what we've seen before, based on just video imagery. But what we found in other sites, just like this, is that what happens is that the hot fluid that's coming out isn't just warm, ordinary seawater. It's enriched in a whole bunch of chemicals you don't normally find in seawater. In fact, chemicals that will react with oxygen in the seawater, and so they're chemically unstable. Now, those reactions would take place anyway, even in the absence of life, but it turns out what we actually find around these systems is it isn't just an interesting feature geologically and geochemically, but life takes advantage of this free energy. Basically, nobody leaves a free lunch lying around on the seafloor, and so what's actually happening are these organisms are taking available of the chemical energy there. The shrimp we believe, although this looks like a new species we've never seen before, but the other species we've seen a bit like this, there's a at the base of the food chain, basically, there are microbes, these tiny little organisms, and what they can do is they can actually take advantage of the chemistry or the chemicals dissolved in the fluid and those microbes can then basically use that to fix carbon dioxide from seawater to make organic carbon for food, both for themselves and their host organisms. And what seems to be an issue here, we weren't quite sure what kind of organisms might live on the mid-Cayman Rise before we started the explorations we've been doing here. So it seems like probably what we're going to find is if we actually capture some of these shrimp, what we'd expect to see is that they're the kind that actually host some of those microbes. So they're basically they're almost like farming the microbes, and then the microbes are both providing or obtaining nutrition and protection from the shrimp. The shrimp can then move towards the chemistry in the warm water, and that provides access for the chemicals to the microbes. The microbes fix that carbon dioxide, and it's a I scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of arrangement, so that the microbes don't just benefit from the organic carbon for themselves. There's a payback to the shrimp as well, and that's actually what helps feed the shrimp and how the shrimp themselves survive. It's actually a thing called symbiosis. Basically, when you get two organisms like that are mutually dependent on one another, that's a symbiotic relationship, it's called. And so that's basically what we're seeing. Right here on the Mid-Cayman Rise? Sure, why not? But the one of the questions about, or what we do know when it comes to questions about how did life originate, on this planet or anywhere else, one of the things we do know is that if we look at a sort of like a DNA-based tree of life, if we try and trace back to what we think the most primitive organisms are on Earth, we know that they liked living in high temperature. We know they liked living without there necessarily being much oxygen around in chemically reducing environments, as we call them. And all hydrothermal systems we know fit both those two criteria. But the other thing we've noticed is that the most primitive organisms of the lot really like hydrothermal systems that have very high levels of hydrogen in them, so they're particularly chemically reducing. And so for the longest time, maybe 20 years or so, we didn't really think that seafloor hydrothermal systems were a viable model for where life could have originated, or a useful natural laboratory to understand those processes. But there's a whole new class of hydrothermal systems that are hosted in rocks that normally cool and form deep beneath the Earth's surface, where if you can get hydrothermal activity reacting with those kinds of rocks, then you could get these very hydrogen-rich types of hydrothermal system that might just be, be able to tell us useful things about how life might have originated, or how how you could have generated the kinds of building blocks for life that one needs before we could even contemplate how life could have got started. So from a geological and chemical perspective, you need a particular kind of rock type, and the only way you can get at that is if you've got, in the modern Earth, the only way you can get that at the Earth's surface for the last couple of 1,000 million years is that the Earth hasn't been hot enough to erupt that kind of rock as a lava on the seafloor. But if you get really deep penetrating cracks that can actually slide rocks up to the seabed from a long way down, from more than 6 kilometers down, you can actually get those exposed at the seafloor. And that's exactly what we're hot on the trail of here. We have some preliminary evidence just from some of the water samples we took from over this vent site last night. We've seen very high methane concentrations, which suggest to us that as we explore this further, that's exactly what we're going to be able to demonstrate, is those are the right kinds of rock types, and that's exactly what's happening with this particular kind of hydrothermal field. So we've found one of the more recent discoveries. It's a really interesting thing that the Mid-Cayman Rise is one of the slowest spreading, deepest, least volcanically active mid-ocean ridges on Earth. 20 years ago, we'd have thought it was the least promising and least interesting place to even think about trying to explore for hydrothermal activity. And then suddenly, about 10 years ago, we had a complete about turn in our understanding of the research, and said, well, then from a theoretical perspective, if you ever could find a hydrothermal site at one of these locations, it could potentially be very, very interesting geochemically. So that's why we're here, and we look like we're doing quite well so far. My apologies to everybody on the party line. I just realized I didn't put you on mute while I was doing something for the cameramen here on the ship. I hope you aren't all squirming too much with how I roved roughshod over your research.
We loved it. We just loved it.
Pity you didn't hear the question. He actually asked what I had for lunch.
And we loved it. We enjoyed those things, eating other things.
I see we've been on sediment for about 5 minutes. So this really is encouraging for me, because I was wondering if there actually was an end to this hydrothermal field at all. And to be out on this stuff.
I have a question for the geologist. Is this liable to be hydrothermal sediment that's settled out from the plume, or is it liable to be hemipelagic?
At that color, Paul, that is almost certainly biogenic calcium carbonate predominantly, except that I can already see some red coloring in that, so there's almost certainly hydrothermal precipitate in there as well, but of the iron oxyhydroxide, it's certainly not sulfidic sediment. So here we are now, the vehicle is now at 2360. Apparently the seafloor is dropping away ahead of us. The water depth here is 2360, pretty much, the water depth. And as you can see, this is facing on a heading of 140, so southeast. And that's nice. So we're perfectly lined there on a heading of 182. So this is looking north-south. We have uphill is to our right, downhill is to our left. So this is a north-south facing very sharp cliff face. Or north-south striking very sharp cliff face, east facing. Go ahead, Nav. I think that would be awesome, yeah. If we're, as soon as you're ready to go, then I think just follow along this and see where the cliff goes and what it reveals for us. I expect our geologists may well want to see some interesting rocks if they see any, so I'll keep a lookout both both on the audio feed and on the instant messaging to see if they come up with anything they particularly want to look at. So we're getting ready to move off. The ROV is sitting at the southeast most limit of where we've been so far, and we are about to head north. We are about 60 or meters east of the spire. We're heading due north over some very heavily, well, compared to yesterday, heavily sedimented rubble and talus. The vehicle is at 2355 meters depth, facing due north. The Sirius is heading due north directly above it at a depth of 2345 and an altitude of 28, so that makes that about 2375 meters is the water. This is yeah, because I think there's an offset. I don't remember seeing terrain like this yesterday, so. Pilot, this is Watchley. Do you know what any current you're experiencing today? Sorry, video, I had 4 voices in my head there. Was that you were just saying I need to repeat the questions to relate to everyone else what we're doing? very good. Okay, so anybody who's listening along at home, what we're just doing right now is we're just settling the ROV up a little bit just to check if we can actually tell if there's any current that's blowing stuff around, because that's going to be useful information, not just for today with the ROV, but also later in the day when we're trying to track water column plumes up in for one or more other places. And the answer today we can see, as you can see with those particles just settling gently down in front of the video in front of you, there is almost no current in any direction whatsoever. So, which is actually pretty good. It means the ROV can work just as well in all directions, rather than being blown one way or another. Just makes life that little bit easier for them, given that we're making them drive up this precipice. But, you know, sometimes that's just what you do for fun. The ROV is heading pretty much north on a bearing of 015 degrees at a depth of 2347 meters. We're basically heading north along a south to north line, along the eastern periphery of the Von Damm hydrothermal field. We are about 50 meters deeper than the vent side itself, or the top of the vent side. And we've come away from the thick sediment cover we had to the south, and we're now passing over a very steep, rubbly slope, which drops away out of sight down to our right, which is to the east. We're basically running along near the edge of a very big, well, cliff face, potentially. And Bobby and Mike, if you're looking at this kind of terrain here, is this the kind of thing, if we were going to do a geologic terrain going from east to west, that this might be a promising place to look at rocks types for a future dive? Or is this too much slumping to be helpful?
It just is rubble. It's hard to know what this
You're
is.
way out in front of me.
You might as well go ahead and get up in anticipation of things to come.
Okay.
Is there any way to go further back?
Okay, is there any way we can back up? Apparently the guys ashore thinks it was further back. And if you bear with us, there's a 2-second delay to shore, and they're typing as fast as they can. Let's hold it there for a moment.
It was about 1 meter back, pan to the left.
And somebody ashore, give us some instructions of whether we're in the right place yet.
Right, it was just after the whitish rocks we investigated. Pan to the right.
Okay. Can we pan back to the right from there, please? The advice is. Are we there yet?
Pan a little bit more to the right and proceed slowly.
They were saying a little to the right as well, maybe?
Started to venture off, and it was a little bit to the right of the white rocks and a little bit lower, we think.
And maybe a little lower down as well, apparently.
Don't pan too far.
Okay, let's drop a waypoint here anyway, just in case. So, navigator, can we drop a waypoint there, please, instead? So the guys ashore know what's happening. We're basically, something you can't see on my sonar, as we're up against a cliff edge. So with the two-body vehicle, we've had to bail out of that. There was a limit to how much more we could maneuver. we're going to drop a marker there anyway, and if somebody could type in what they think they saw as a potential worm tube site. There's something pale down to the right, pilot, or center of the screen now.
Yeah, going for this.
So you see some. See, these are quite rounded lumps we're seeing here. If it wasn't inconvenient for my prejudices, I'd think that pale thing was a really heavily weathered pillow basalt. Can we zoom in on that a little bit? Sorry, I should have said that to you, video, should I? Okay, pilot, that little white rock we went over, is there a chance to set up for video to look at that?
You mean a clip?
I just wanted to be able to zoom in and actually look at it.
All right, we can do that.
Sorry. Pilot and nav, are you listening to me all the time, or do I have to call out for you? Very good.
Otherwise, I hear all the chatter ashore and get overloaded.
Understood. Okay, so we're just coming up to have a look at this little white rock. See exactly what it is.
Let's get a slow zoom here. Just gonna have to fly.
And what you can see there is the white outer rim must be, well, 10 centimeters apart from the lasers, which is like a circular rim. So these kind of shapes, the morphologies, speak to me of pillow basalts. It's a typical form of volcanic lava eruption. And then the outer halo that would be consistent with weathering from the outside towards the in, so that the darker stuff in the middle would be less weathered. Which is kind of interesting because it means we've moved into a potentially different rock type here. But this would actually be the basalts that you find as lava's erupted on the seabed, as opposed to rocks that are lifted up from deep within the earth along big fault structures.
Chris, at the left end of that rock, just on the sediment, it looks very blue, as though it could be hydrothermal.
Pilot and video, can we pan to the left end of that boulder, please? There's a suggestion there might be some blue sediment along that way.
Just coming into the screen there.
That's it, just under the lasers now. Yeah, okay, I don't think I'm learning much from that. Thank you.
No, that's right.
What we can see on the sonar is a very steep wall, which is running east, northeast to west, southwest along the side of us here. So we're basically, everything off to our left is uphill, everything to our right is downhill. So a crudely north-south striking scarp. This is more consolidated rock just here. It's looks less angular and fragmented, but maybe it's got gunge holding the clasts together. And what we can see there is we just went over an area with more consolidated rock, less classed, and now we're back into this area where there's a lot of sediment and rubble in amongst the big lumps of rock. The vehicle is still pretty much heading due north. There's some white coloration on those rocks down there. What are those? What's the little white things down there in front of you? I have some interesting biology. Are these worm tubes? I think off to your left on the screen right now. Okay. Navigator, while we're setting up with ROV, can we drop a waypoint here? Assuming we're not in somewhere, well. And then if we can get an idea of how this relates to things like marker 12 yesterday, please. So here we are, we're looking at, this is quite reddish coloured sediment when we get up close to it. It's an interesting thing that the colour red attenuates very quickly in water, in light underwater. But what we can see is this tube here looks very reminiscent of tube worm organisms. There's, I don't know, we'll wait to hear from Paul whether there's any evidence of life here, I suspect.
Doesn't look alive to me, but it looks very much like Sepiophilia that you get up at the cold seeps in the Gulf of Mexico. Any comments from Jameson or Diva?
An interesting thing here, if this was a live tube worm, the white stuff around the outside that people are looking at, we'll put the lasers on in a moment to give you an idea of scale, but
can I butt in, Chris?
Yes, do.
When we're videoing, can we go down towards the rear end of it to see how, if it's attached or whether it's going into the sediment?
Pilot and video, when you get a chance, what we'd like to do is actually look at the other end of the tube to see whether it's attached or whether it's buried in sediment. Maybe zoom out a little for observation when you've got your clips. So Paul, do you want to describe what we're looking at just here?
A dead tube worm, will that do?
Sure. Okay. For those listening at home who don't know
Sorry,
what
I'll rephrase that. The tube of a dead tube worm. I think this might be.
There we go.
It doesn't look as though it's alive. It looks almost translucent in places.
But it's in a...
These sort of tube worms, certainly in cold seeps where it's very sedimentary, part of the tube is buried in the sediment, and the hydrogen sulfide goes in through the base of the tube rather than in through the tentacles as it does on the big red riftia that you get at hydrothermal vents in the Pacific. And I suspect that's what might be happening here. There might be enough hydrogen sulfide in the finer sediment here to support a few tube worms. It would be really nice to find some living ones.
Okay. Nav, were you waiting to talk to me? Thank you. Pilot, are there more of these worm tubes to look at? That one was clearly a dead one, but we'd like to see if we can scout around and see if we can find anything live nearby. Excellent. We'll take a look at those as well. I see a higher, yeah, we see 3 or 4 of those worm tubes. I guess what... You got a live one. Beauty.
He's really got a live one, do you think?
We got red stuff sticking out the end of it.
That is absolutely fantastic.
How awesome is that, huh? Wow, somebody should film this. Oh, we're doing that. Okay, good.
No, this is worth a
Big
good
round of
time.
applause.
This is absolutely brilliant.
This is no time to be on a dry ship.
Can we get a zoom on the actual filter?
I think they take time setting the ROV down. It doesn't feel as though it's set down to me yet, and then they'll take some time getting it really set up. For those of you that have not used this before, we've been told to be very patient. with the setting up of the video because they really do it carefully. But this is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Pilot, feel free to turn the lasers off while you're just getting your video. This is too nice to want to share with spots just yet. And Paul, I'm going to show my geologic understanding here and say, is that like a lamellobrachia?
Yes, Chris. There's two in the Gulf of Mexico. There's lamellobrachia and sepiophilia. This looks, in a way, you look more like lamellobrachia, but the coiling of the tube is more like sepiophilia on the other one. But look at that! Isn't that just absolutely wonderful?
I think exquisite is the word of the day.
Exquisite it is.
Remember, I did tell you at the start of the day today, the magic word for today was tube worm. I'm just glad none of you know Pee Wee Herman.
I suspect this is the first tube worm in the Caribbean. All the others are in the Gulf of Mexico. And where there's one hopes there's others.
So everybody knows back home, what we're looking at here, these are tube worms. If you haven't seen a tube worm before, this is the prettiest one I've ever seen on the planet right now. The way they work, the part you're seeing now, this gnarly little scrunched up tube, is basically made of chitinous material, not that different from what your fingernails are made of. And
Chris, can we go back to the head end, please?
I think the video people are just getting what they want at the moment, Paul. We'll get to the head end.
Gotcha.
Video, are you just shooting what you want right now? Okay, so everybody at home knows what we're about to do. We're just going to pan down the length of this worm now from the far end up towards the mouth, or the head of it. Not quite sure what the correct term is.
Anterior end.
The anterior end, the front, for those of you listening in Latin. So the outer tube, this white material, is this chitinous material. That basically provides strength. Then what we'll see at the front end is the red portion. That's basically the live part of the worm. And the red color, Paul, comes from basically hemoglobin, very similar to human blood, correct? It transports the oxygen and the hydrogen sulfide into the interior and feeds the microbes.
No, it doesn't transport the hydrogen sulfide. I suspect the hydrogen sulfide goes in through the tube if this is like the ones in the Gulf of Mexico. It's like the ones in the Pacific. The hydrogen sulfide does go in through the tentacles, as does oxygen,
So
as does bicarbonate. And of course, the clever trick with these tube worms is that they can bind hydrogen sulfide. If I injected you with hydrogen sulfide, you'll be dead in a few minutes. But they combine it with a protein and make it non-toxic.
Okay, so we're getting pulled off the side of the cliff, so we're getting ready to move on.
I think we need to have just a little more of a look round here if we
Okay.
can, in a small area.
Okay,
You
let
know,
me ask the pilot.
one's
Paul,
nice,
to interrupt
but two
you
is
there.
better.
Okay, Pilot, is there any chance to look around some more here and steady up?
I'm gonna come around the other side of this rock pile because pretty soon I'm gonna get pulled that way.
And Navigator, we did drop a marker there, didn't we? Marker, I couldn't hear you.
Looks like we got a fair distribution here. There's 4 up.
Well,
Shells.
you know, just before we found the live tube worm, you told me you could see some clamshells. What are those in the sediment off to the left there?
Well, look at these. These are mussels. This is a whole.
We need to zoom in on this if we can.
Yeah, let's zoom in on this. This is mussels being swept down slope, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna work up a little bit here.
So we are now at a water depth of 2348 meters. The ROV is on a heading of 262, so heading west into this cliff face. We're looking at sediment. There's a lot of shelly material, and all the evidence is this is stuff that's falling down the slope. So we've seen empty shells so far. Navigator, can we drop a marker here anyway, just in case we don't find something more exciting upslope, please? So we're going to drop marker 20 right here. So we see some white shelly material dead ahead. What is this we're looking at?
It looks like Bathymodiola shells to me, but that might be wishful thinking.
Oh, I think perfectly good wishful thinking there. And if we have dead ones down the bottom of a hill, uphill seems like a good way to go, right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're seeing the end of a particular community here, a mixture of tube worms and mussels, and then it's just run out of steam. Bit like the Darwin mud volcano in Gulf of Cadiz. You know, essentially lots of dead shell and very few living ones, because it's just run out of methane.
But do you think they're dead in situ, Paul, or do you think we should continue uphill? Even if they're dead, it's worth zooming in probably, just to see if we can identify exactly what they used to be when they were alive.
What
Just
direction
at the
are we
top of the
headed?
screen, there might be a live one there, another tube right in the sediment. Do you see?
A tube? Let's pan up, please, pilot.
It's at the bottom of the screen now.
Oh, now at the bottom of the screen, apparently.
Now going up the screen, it's about 2/3
In the
from
centre of the
a
screen.
third.
Okay, can somebody... Actually, let's put the... If you put the lasers on, I can drive you again. And so just above the right laser, there's something round and discoloured. And the thought is whether that's a bit of tube worm.
Unfortunately, the picture they're seeing is not nearly as wonderful as this one.
No, that's actually... That looks like shell material, correct?
Yeah, it could well be. Sorry about that.
No problem. And
It does look like a bit of shell material just to its down to its bottom right.
can we look down to the bottom right of that as well? I think touching that is another piece of shell.
Just coming into...
Actually, I think directly top of the screen above the right laser dot right now. Let's zoom on that.
Okay, well, in on this. Better position.
Paul, any idea? Aren't Bathymodiolis mussels darker than that?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Um, it doesn't look like a Bathymodeola shape to me. It looks more like... No, it doesn't even look like Diptygina. I'm not sure what it is. It looks like it's been there a long time, though.
Okay. What else would you like to do from the biologists while we're in this area? Would you like to look at some of the more of those worm tubes? Or do you want to keep moving?
I think we should think about keeping moving. We've got good fixes on the worm tubes, and I
Yes.
think it would be worth coming back. I don't know what other people think, but I think we need to actually make sure we complete the survey today.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Nav. Pilot, this is watch lead. So I think the consensus from the guys back on base is that we really ought to keep on with our survey program as well, make sure we get the whole survey done today. So we've got a good fix on that tube worm. If we don't see any others, we know where to come back to that one. And it's probably time to keep going, I'm afraid, even though this was very good fun. So it's pretty interesting that where we're at right now, in terms of our surveys, we're at the most northeast corner of where we thought should be the perimeter of everything that was interesting on the Von Damm site. And it was only while we were settling up with the ship there and letting things settle out that we actually found our first live tube worm here on this hydrothermal field. So it's pretty cool. We have, even if it's only one tube worm, that's one more than not finding any at all.
Chris, what's that on the rocks?
Paul, you said you saw something on the rocks. Can you tell me which direction?
Just in the bottom of the screen, I think it was... It's not the most clear screen, this one, but just down there. Can you see the left-hand end of the screen?
I don't. You have to tell me what you're looking at, Paul. Sorry, pilot.
Sorry, it looks like tubes again.
And suddenly we're still heading pretty much north, and we're suddenly into quite decent sediment cover again. This looks more like biogenic carbonate. Just spinning around now to look back, and we're now facing back to the south. So it's that big rubble pile there and a lot of soft sediment. And that's what we can see. There's worm tubes right there in front of us. Is that?
That looks like the area I
What's-
was thinking, just to the left.
Can we see what's just below us from here? Can we go back and down?
Yeah, I'm lighting up the slide. What the slide came down the margin of this boulder field here. It's in front. Just follow me with the so you can see it as I light it.
Okay, so it looks like what we're looking at here is this is a large sediment slide that's been sweeping down, is basically buried over the top of the boulders and rocks in this area compared to elsewhere where there's not the same sediment cover. And so this is where we found the tube worm and some dead worm tubes in this sediment. There's a lot of shell material as well, so basically a lot of biological activity being swept down from further uphill from here.
Now they look like Bathymodiolus.
So we're seeing shells, look like a crab on that rock there, just passing underneath the lasers.
I get the impression there's an increase in shell.
And with less sand in some of them.
Can you say that again, Bobby, please? That broke up.
It's as if there's less sand in some of the shells as well, so perhaps more recent.
So the vehicle is now at 2339 meters. So the ROV has now come uphill somewhat from where we were seeing all that shell and rubble together. We're now at a water depth of 2238. The ship is just getting itself lined up, and we're back over a lot of very angular clasts. You can see that the sediment concentration just drops right off directly ahead here in the video screen. So we're back into angular lumps and rocks, and well, I guess that's an interesting thing. If Paul was saying that the tube worms we did see, or the tube worm we did see, makes a living by actually extracting the sulfide from the sediment, then maybe it's just a function of substrate that it's only when we see the sediment we could see those things. Huge amounts of sediment off in the distance directly ahead as we're looking now, which is on a heading of 014 degrees ahead of us. So the vehicle is still looking to the north, but we're about to swing around now, and we've got the ship moving off to the west. So here we are back in another sedimented section of this slope. Very large boulder we're just passing over there, but then you can see this fine sediment filling in a lot of the spaces. You can only just see lumps of rock sticking out from underneath that. So this is very much like the terrain where we did find the tube worms earlier, but they stand out as nice and bright and white compared to the yellowy brown colour of the sediment. And we're facing now 027, so that's north-northeast off ahead of us. It looks pretty flat and sedimented there, so we're at the top of a scarp. Vehicle's at a depth of 2333, and total depth here right now is 2351 meters, or 2350, approximately, based on the depth of Sirius and the altitude above bottom. So you can see a real change in slope. Looking out on our left right now, there's a lot of flat sediment.
Are there mussels to the left?
So later on, people asked if we had mussels to the left. But let's go ahead to that coral. There's a holothurian down there on the left, it looks like. 2 holothurians. Did you spot the holothurians as well as you approached that? Yeah. Yep, let's just have a look at them, but then keep us going on the science survey, please. So this is very thick sediment now. This is the most sediment cover we've seen. You can't actually see in the current field of view on Sirius any class sticking out from the seafloor, just bioturbated carbonate sediment with holothurians living around here and there. In fact, you get one out of the screen of view and another one appears. Shrimp, is that off to the right, passing by? Few angular clasts, another holothurian. So we're now heading along a line which is off to the north of the central hydrothermal spire. We are facing on a heading of 288 degrees, so pretty much due west. And what we can see now is a heavily sedimented slope dropping away to our right, which means it's going from south to north downhill. It's not hydrothermal enough to want to worry about too much.
Makes a useful northern boundary.
Yes, at least in it's kind of interesting. At least we know on the northern side, and I think we had this on the southern side as well, apart from that one patch of shrimp, that we are actually getting some delimitation to where's interesting and where isn't. I think the discovery of the tube worm today tells us that we certainly hadn't gone too far east yet by the end of yesterday's dive. Definitely continuing the survey, we've continued to find new and very cool things. And then we're ending sediment cover here and moving back over to a lot of boulders and blocks. Now in this case the blocks are uphill, which suggests they've actually cascaded down over the biogenic carbonate rather than it being a sediment chute on this occasion. Actually looks like one of each. Looks like the stuff off to the left is a groove that's been hollowed out, and the bit on the right is actually raised sediment. Looks like a hole on the... Strange.
It's a 4-foot long lugworm.
Yeah. Weird stuff. So it's about 10 centimeters across, must be about a meter long, going by the laser scaling. Is the little crack there. Well, who knows what that might be. Okay, thank you, pilot. Right there, right in that crevice.
It's also to the right. It's all along the middle of the image.
No, there's animals in there, aren't there? What are those animals in there? Are those gastropods? Look at the...
There's shrimp in there as well, isn't it? Yeah,
Yep.
in the top
Well,
left.
There's some tube things, but those could be
And
siphons,
tubey, yeah.
could be clams that are buried in the sediment, or mussels in the sediment maybe, that extending out, who knows. And there's some, yeah, Paul or Cindy, there's some dark red things on the very right of the field of view there. Some dark red looks almost like tube worm material, chitinous material, what's that? It's a tube worm, right?
Could well be, yeah.
Let's zoom
A
in on
tube.
that.
That looks like a part of a palm frond.
Okay, there's weird stuff. Answers on a postcard. What do we think we found here today, folks? You know, I am not quite sure. We were driving along in the area that I was saying, you know, I can't wait to get finished with this part. This is really dull over this side of the mountain. Let's go around the other side. And we were just driving over flat mud, flat mud, flat mud. There was a little dip down in the mud that was a little bit discolored. Some rocks coming out of that. And
And left gently, please, Chris.
one of the pilots Pilot and video, if we get a chance, can we pan to the left a little bit, please? Okay, for the scientists listening at home, our camera guys are getting their own video just now. We'll have to wait for our stuff. Why don't video and pilot, why don't you do what you want to do and then stand by and then get back in touch with us to ask us what we'd like to see later on.
I'm just wondering if some of those things we're seeing are amphipods. Diva, Jameson, what do you think?
Paul or anybody else at home, what is the what's that large thing that's filling up about half the screen right now? Anybody got any ideas?
Yes, I suggested they might be palm fronds.
Okay, apparently we let's see.
What's hanging on the underside of those rocks? Just close to where I think there's palm fronds.
We're gonna look at what's hanging there in a moment. We're just collecting letting the cameramen just get their stuff set up, and then they're gonna let us fit around. Okay, our first request we have is to go look at what's on the underside of that rock, the overhanging rock that's in dark shadow there. So if we could start in on the underside of that rock, if we can. Sorry, pilot, I forgot we have a fixed camera. So Paul, since you have the real-time microphone feed to me, if you want to drive me, then I can drive the pilot if you're not getting what you want.
Getting what I want, but I'm not sure what it is. In the top left, can we zoom right in and just have as close look at that as possible?
Okay, can we...
Whatever it's weird.
Pilot, can we pan up and look at what that is on the top left corner just now? And can we zoom in any closer?
My guess is that's a sponge, and that looks a bit like a. I'm desperate about saying anything with Cindy around. Not clarirized sponge, is it, Cindy?
Okay, Paul, have you seen enough of that one? Are we ready to look back and...
Sorry, Chris. Thanks very much.
And then down at the bottom there, at the bottom of the rock, biologists, tell me, what are we seeing there? So the RV team know. I'm asking the biologists what we're looking at that are online, both ashore, just to get an idea of what animals we're looking at, and then pilot and video, I'll come back to you of what we should then turn to try and film if that's okay. Pilot, is there a way we could come at this from a different angle, maybe, and see it better?
It looks like I'm at the end of my tether.
Okay. Okay, is there more shimmer closer to us than that?
Yeah, Chris, just thinking ahead here. Current position of Sirius, we think we're left. Of where Middle Hope is looking right now. Gain tether.
Very good.
What's lead on now? 31st.
Oh, fantastic.
What's lead now?
Go ahead, Nav. You're on mute.
Is the plan just to do the 2 lines that we discussed earlier?
Yes, it is.
How about we look at that upper right? Stay lower. Look right there.
Centimeters across, 10 or 20 centimeters deep. Yeah, let's have a look at this.
Let's make sure we have a marker here in case we haven't marked it before.
Yep, we think this is marker 9, but Nav, could we drop a marker here? We believe it might be the same site as what we called marker 9 yesterday, but it's worth re-navigating.
Chris, of course, now these tubes might still be live because the worm goes quite a way down inside them sometimes.
If we have time, could we possibly zoom on the anterior end of the terminus of the tube worm that seems to be elongated over the stretch of rock closer to the ROV?
That sounds good. I'll put that request in. Pilot and video, just so you know that what we had a request from science is whether we could zoom in on both the anterior end, which is off to the left, and the posterior end of that one that's stretched out right in the center of the field of view right now. Both ends, please. Thank you. one of the comments we've had from the biologists on the field is that just because we can't see an organism sticking out from the end of the tube doesn't mean they aren't alive and well. They're just a little shy and they're not coming out for the cameras today. Apparently they actually withdraw quite a long way into their tube. So we did see that one earlier on that was sticking out, but these actually may be alive and well. They're just taking the weekend off. Yeah, you can almost just see something protruding out from the edge of that if you really have good geo-imagination. Okay, start singing sweetly in the front row. Coax it out. That's a So Jameson back in Rhode Island, are you getting what you want here?
Yes, thank you.
And we were wondering here in the van, in the control room on the ship, whether there wasn't just a hint that there was the head of the thing at the anterior end was just trying to poke out. But that was probably just wishful thinking on my part. So pilot, so you know, the real killer thing is if we ever see it, the little red bit coming out the front end of those tubes, that's when we get really excited.
Chris, can we have the lasers on, please?
Pilot, can we get lasers on, please? There's little filamentous stuff in there just to the right of the right-hand laser. Is this all dead or is this tailless? Just to the right of that shell, there's some little wispy translucent stuff. Yeah, it's probably... Yeah, go ahead, Nav. Thank you for that prompt.
Chris, my thoughts, as a thinking out loud again, I wonder if these are vesicomyid shells. They might well be found in the same sort of environment as tube worms.
Good point. Go ahead, Nav. Very good, thank you. That's a plank. We have our own.
It is a piece of wood.
We have our own
It's a
woodfall
holothurian.
with a holothurian making a home in it. Okay, pilot.
So we are going to find shipwrecks.
I told you Johnny Depp wasn't far away. Pirates of the Caribbean. So, pilot, I think we probably want to get on our way, and I need to try and be a bit more disciplined about us. Keep them moving north, please. Thank you. So we're getting into the last hour of our dive today now. We're at a depth of 2364 meters. We're at the southeastmost corner of where we've surveyed thus far. We've just seen a large cluster of worm tubes. We couldn't verify whether there were any live tube worms there or not, but there was certainly a high aggregate concentration of them. And we are now preparing the ship to move north, which will be our easternmost line over this cliff. And this is offset about 15 meters to the east of one of the lines we did earlier in this dive. And it was towards the northern end there was actually where we found an example of live tube worms at this site. The ROV right now is just swinging round. It's actually on a heading of 303 degrees, so it's looking kind of northwest. The ship itself will be heading off to the north, off to our right slightly. So we are at a depth of 2360 meters with the ROV, 2362. There's a little fish swimming by gently on the right. We are on a heading of 092 degrees here, so the ROV is looking out due east off the edge of the mound. The survey line we're beginning is actually going to be going up to the north, and we're looking straight down the hill. Basically it continues down the way we're looking there. Eventually about 10 miles off directly ahead it goes down to 5,000 meters. So at the depths we're at, we're not even halfway down to the bottom of the Mid-Cayman Rise. But that's pretty cool because it turns out there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff up the top of these hills, or what our geologist friends call oceanic core complexes. Yep, so that's some fresh shimmering flow we have there. Pilot, that's pretty cool.
When you say fresh, Chris, what do you mean by fresh? No, yesterday or 10,000 years ago?
When did I say fresh that anyone was hearing? Sorry. That was...
Did you say that was a fresh flow?
Oh, it was, sorry, it was shimmering water. What we're seeing here is it's I meant new, one we haven't seen before. There's some active fluid flow at the base of that rock that we could see on the screen here.
I couldn't see that on my screen. Fantastic.
Now, Pilot, you're going to be able to get us back to look at that shimmering flow again?
And that looks like a tube worm.
And a voice in my head, Pilot, said that that may well have been a tube worm later on, but let's zoom on the flow first. So what we're looking at here, it's hard to see as sure, but if you can see when the very dark crevices just there, there's a Schlieren effect. So that's warm water is coming out from the underside of that rock. So we are at, the vehicle is at a depth of 2350 meters. We are coming up the east side of the main spire. So we can see dark rock there, it's sediment underneath. And the Schlieren effect on the water tells you there's active fluid flow there. Go ahead, Pilot. Very good. Navigator, can we drop a marker here? Thank you very much. So we're dropping marker 24 here, the combination of vehicle and ship that's moving. We don't actually get to stop there. Pilot, could we just look at that little white thing that was sticking out from the rock, or are we too late? Beautiful colors on that rock. It's interesting that Paul, do you think that, what do you think you're looking at here?
I think it's an old tube and it's got an anemone attached to it and a couple of other, it looks like hydroids and a couple of anemones. It's either a Gorgonian base or a tube base. I think it's a Gorgonian base with anemones attached to it.
Gorgonian coral, right? Deep sea coral?
Yeah.
Understood. Okay, thank you, Pilot. We think that's an anemone on an old piece of coral, masquerading as a weirdly deformed tube worm. So the vehicle now is on a heading of 065 degrees, looking out east-northeast, downhill. You see these spurs now sticking out from there, running downhill of rock and material and little gullies in between. Are these little bits of coral or something on these? So these are more deep sea corals, Paul, is that correct?
Yeah, they all look like the bases to me. You know, it'd be interesting to know, what happened to them.
I guess they're living in a pretty rough neighborhood, right? There's a lot of stuff falling downhill from up above here.
Yeah, I guess so. I'd have thought anything falling down might have missed them, but you never
But
know.
they're basically filter feeders. This is evidence that if anything, we're moving out into the sort of background fauna. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's reasonable. Looks like a live one coming into view.
Very good. Gorgeous. Okay, so we're heading the vehicle back on track, heading of pretty much due north. Vehicle's at 2358 meters. Water depth here is 2368 meters underneath Sirius. So very steep slope continuing downhill from west to east as we head north along the side of it. Watch lead nav. If marker 19 was where we saw the live tube went before, that was just uphill of where we just were, correct? Okay, so that was interesting that where we were just looking at those corals was directly downhill on the previous line. It was straight uphill from there was actually where we saw the live tube worms previously. So again, this is providing perhaps some encouragement that we really have reached the outer limits even to the east side. And then if we're really lucky, then the moment I've said that I'll be proved wrong and we'll come and stumble upon something fascinating all the way down here on the side of the hill. But if not, it could actually be that we're on track to finish our survey up to the northern end, and we really will feel like we've mapped out the entire outer limits of this hydrothermal field. There's I think I'm going to be brave enough to say that I know that's a holothurian on the seafloor. Yay, and a biologist has confirmed it. So we're continuing north here. The vehicle is still at a 2357 meters water depth. You can see actually quite a lot of sediment downhill from here. You can see the boulders. It's almost as if we're reaching maybe I just want to believe that we're at a rock to sediment contact here on the east side of the mound. Go ahead,
Can we
Nav.
look out in the sediment just to see if there's any pock marks?
Say again, please, Nav. That's correct, yep. And are those some more of those little pock marks in the sediment there? What's that white discoloration? Do we have time to have a look at that? You see like the little light circular patches under the laser right now? Just a different color sediment, isn't it? It's not hollowed out or anything. I think we are at the stage of the...
Okie
Okay,
dokie.
thank you. Make sure there's not anything interesting living in this sediment now we're down here. This is now we're at a depth of 2358 meters. I'm just going to check something. Navigator, this watch lead.
Yes, what's it?
Can I get a range and bearing to marker 016, please, from from Little Herc?
From Little Herc 2016.
Yes, please.
97 meters, 234 sorry, 232 degrees.
232?
Yes, 232.
Thank you.
Hitting the brakes on it. Flip left the little body to the left. See what we're doing.
Mussel shells?
Are those mussel shells again in under the lasers there and off to the left?
Certainly look like it, don't they?
Pilot, can we get a video on that?
We're just downslope from where we saw them before, maybe?
Yes, this is on this line now. What we're doing is we are facing west, facing uphill, and we're about 15 meters further east and an according amount further deep than we were when we came past here previously, and we're getting pretty much the same story of we're seeing a lot of dead shells in a sediment chute that seems to be coming downhill through the rubble. But it does beg the question of whether these are things that at some point in the past this sediment has been conducive and they lived inside the sediment, or whether the sediment and the shells have all been swept down from higher uphill. Because if it's the latter, I don't think we actually found the uphill place they came from. Or at least we didn't yet.
That looks like a Bathymodiolus shell.
Alive or dead?
Oh, very dead.
Now, Paul, do Bathymodiolus live, are they in fauna? Do they like to live inside sediments?
No, they live normally on top of the sediment or on top of rock.
Okay.
Well, I think our next move will be generally westish, so it's fine to look ahead.
Follow these shells up the hill to try and find a source as we finish the line.
Yeah, that's a one of the things we might try and do, so you guys know in the front row, if you're listening. Bobby, can you hear me?
Okay.
So what we're probably going to do is when we're going to finish the line, we've got to come back this way to try and find the tube worms. And the other thing we might then try and do is follow this scree slope uphill, because we know we've confounded it twice on 2 consecutive lines, and maybe see where these animals are coming from, assuming they're being swept downhill.
Okay, we've got that here in Rhode Island.
Have we seen those white things right in front of us? What's that up above the lasers, sort of top left? Is that more worm tubes? A little left, 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 and then up. Okay. Alright, just more shells. Sorry, I thought they looked a bit longer. They could have been tubes, but no. My mistake. And now this is watch lead. Is the ship at the end of the line now? I had you zoom in on the false alarm. Yep. Great. It's quite impressive in the Sirius cam just to realize how steep that slope is and get that perspective. Go ahead, Nav. I'll ask somebody ashore to check back on that. Somebody in Rhode Island, could you check back through the event log and remind me what it was we saw at marker 20? So we're starting up slowly now. We're up to 2349 meters, so we've come up 1 meter. We are facing on 308 degrees, spinning around back through 280. This little groove right now is pretty much the contact between sediment on the right and rubble on the left, and that's pretty much the direction we're going to be following straight uphill. It's an interesting thing I've just noticed is whatever the one square grid is on the high pack, dead ahead of us uphill, immediately off to the east of that, there's a whole bunch of dropouts in the sonar. A nav watch lead. Can you just tell me what the scale is on the high pack between the individual squares? Okay, do you see the bright green cloud that's disappearing off the top of the high-pack screen right now?
Stand by watch shooting for this call. Bridge now? No. Sorry, watch lead, what were you saying?
You see the green cloud where your cursor is right now?
Yes.
That would be consistent with sonar dropout because of fluid flow coming out the seafloor.
Yeah, that's right off the peak.
And we're heading straight towards that right now, correct?
Yes.
And what's the range to that peak?
That is 30 meters away.
Then unless we see anything extraordinary, we should continue all the way to there, I think, for the end of the dive.
Yes. With the adjustment between the bathymetry and our position, we actually show up about 34 meters to the south of the bathymetry.
Okay.
So that would put us basically here. You see where my cursor is?
Yep, very good, thank you.
Go ahead, video. Start zooming in. Bridge, this is Nav. Watch, these are the shells that I was thinking about finally to request the ship move to be extended by 20 meters.
Is that video talking to me just then?
Wait, watch the pilot? Yes,
Hi,
please.
pilot, sorry.
Hey, these right here are that pile of shells that you wanted to look at earlier. I had a request to look at.
Very good, thank you.
I'm going to try moving. Keep the light back on that video. Okay, I should move this continuing another 20 meters.
Okay, thank you, pilot, and I think we're ready to move on up the hill. Thank you, that was some nice footage there.
You want to stay on this? I guess I just need to push out from a serious good bit now. Yeah, I think that kind of fine control would be tough to get with the swing. It would be more of a adjust final position 10 meters.
Look at the particles, Chris.
Pilot, are the particle concentrations here because we're higher off bottom, or is that a real change in what's happening in the water column?
We are high off the bottom. It's hard to say
Okay.
what this particulate is coming from. I haven't been up here, so I don't believe it to be particulate coming off the vehicle.
Understood, thank you.
Could be. John, I'm going to come over by you. Down into you. Why don't you come up a little bit?
So we're continuing our search uphill here. We're now at 2338 meters.
270.
Got a little shrimp off and to the left, if we can pan left there. A red shrimp,
Okay.
bottom of your field of view.
See that shrimp on there? Yeah, that's a good John. Your facing will be I got turned around there for a second and thought you were facing 90 off. Oh, do you like that? Movement of the... Is that better, Roland? Better?
And watch lead to pilot. My impression was that it's actually a little bit off to the left from here is where the trail of the dead shells is leading uphill right now.
Right video, line. Gotta go find the shells again.
I think that stuff right under your lasers right now is part of that shell fragment stuff. There's a lot more sediment here than there was before.
Yeah, the line is
Chris, we get the impression here that we've moved out of the area where the mussel shells have been deposited.
Yeah, we seem to lose track of the trail of the dead shells.
Is that a white one up top right?
Yeah, dead ahead of the lasers now and directly above. Looks like above the lasers, pilot. Yep. And also there's a big black rock near the top, just off middle right of your screen. There's more white stuff up there as well.
Here we go, let's get a snap zoom.
So that's white shells actually inside the sediment there.
Water, a little bit water.
Shells dead ahead there. Is that a siphon? You see the shell directly above the lasers? Is that a little siphon sticking out from the top right of it?
Get closer for you, find out. Video, come on, before you do that. Let me get closer.
So we're now at a depth of 2335 meters. We've come up 15 meters uphill. We're into a lot more sediment now.
Yeah, it's really flattened out here. I think we're on kind of saddle.
And these still look like dead shells as far as I can tell. No signs of life. Okay, if we look on our on our sonar, it looks like uphill from here is probably off to our left. Is that correct?
Where were these bridge now? That's good. Ship move is complete. All those little guys.
Watch leader to nav or pilot. Which direction is uphill if we went any further from here?
I believe uphill is southwest of us now. Headwinds forward.
Nav is Sirius still catching up with the ship from that last move, or is it too small to notice?
Yeah, yes, Sirius is still in her move. I think she'll keep moving another 10 meters or so.
And then could we plan one more move that would take us uphill to the southwest from here?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about. Pilot for my last.
Chris, did you see a big hole on the screen then?
Did I see what, sorry?
Did you see a big hole on the screen?
A big hole? No, I didn't. Pilot, did you see a big hole just now?
I did not. Click. On the right, there's a
Guess it's my eyesight.
rolls off back downhill again.
Okay, yep, that's fine, thank you. So we're looking out now on a heading of 028 degrees or 045 degrees, so heading off to the north and east, and flat sediment, and then it disappears over the edge of a cliff. A message to the biologists ashore, Jameson and Cindy in particular. Would you like us to drop a marker where we just were? We've seen that sponge before, or that coral rather.
They think they've seen that coral before, really.
Yep, it's called Fred. Tell Mike he's a Man City friend.
Think he's a Tottenham friend.
Tottenham don't have any friends.
This is live.
So, yeah. This white stuff's kind of interesting right in front of us. That's, well, it's different from other stuff. Worth checking out.
Actually, this is now. That pile of
Go
shells
ahead, Nav.
will be the last heavy indication of shells in that area.
Thanks, pilot. Go ahead, Nav.
I have your anti-bearing from Little Herc to marker 16.
Yes, go ahead, thanks.
70 meters, bearing 204 degrees.
Thank you.
Yeah, pilots, I think it's time to think about setting up. Alright. How'd you like to do this? Have the ship stop and start pulling up? Yeah, that might be a good idea then. Yes, sir? Okay. If Dave agrees. We have word from Dave to follow this to the top. Okay.
So we're at a depth here of 23, 25 meters. If we go more than 30 meters up, there won't be any seafloor left. So we'll be the end of the dive.
Land here on this rock. Okay, I'll catch up to you in a second. Let you catch up as we try to look at some stuff. I was aiming for that white pine. So we probably covered this ground before. We were just sideways to it. Let's see it all. still heading north. Yeah, sorry about that. Checked it up, but nope.
Really granular texture to these rocks. Can we get the lasers on just very briefly, please?
Should be on it.
Oh, there they are. Sorry. So you can see the lasers there at 10 centimeters. These are down at the level of 1 centimeter each.
Let's see what we get. That one right there.
Is that something living on that little bit of rock there that itself is only a centimeter across? Interesting range in colours here of the individual. There's a gastropod actually on the right hand side of that field. Just right of the rock. Keep going right. Got a little curled up snail shell right in the middle there. Amazing what you see when you look closely. Well, I have the ability to look closely with cameras like these.
Stand still.
I don't look that closely in my own garden.
Trying to get me in there to your office.
I say, because we're continuing uphill to end our dive, we're now at 2325 meters. And we've changed course slightly, so we're now heading, vehicles heading on a bearing of 220. So generally south and west, back towards the center of the hydrothermal field. See a lot of yellow coloration coming back into these clasts now. What we're familiar with as you get closer towards the center of the hydrothermal mound.
So you're reading stuff. So you're reading stuff on sonar at the probably want to get you to start coming up.
There's a little Galathea off to the left there as we're going along. Lots of this very light coloured discoloration on the rocks here, this little granular stuff we were looking at before. And plenty of suspended particulate again. I think we noticed that at the start of the dive, but
Bridge now. Take a bridge.
vehicle right now is heading or facing around 162 degrees, so not just due south but a bit out to the east, so away from the edge of the mound as we're coming up. As sonar is showing there's a big target coming around to pretty much dead ahead,
Starting to see shrimp.
192 degrees, so we're bearing southeast. Yeah, we can see shrimp all over this sulfide structure right ahead of us.
Dave, this is now. It'd be really interesting to move the ship 30 more meters and possibly reacquire the spire for tracking. Make sure it still tracks in the same place.
This gives a
Nav,
really
watch
nice
lead.
impression of the shrimp, doesn't it? At the top end of this system.
Yes, watch it.
Watch lead nav. Can we drop a marker here, please, just in case we haven't seen this before?
Okay. I can do that. Before I do that, Dave, I'm just going to set up a little bit better. Yep, come to the other side of that rock. Get that camera more happily placed. Okay, watch lead 025 is a bit high up.
Thank you, nav. So it's marker 25. We're looking at shrimp and diffuse flow. We are at a water ROV depth of 2308 meters on a heading of 216.
Bridge, this is our winner. Okay, can we get a final move? 30 meters, carrying 200 degrees at 0.2 knots.
And what we can do here, everybody, so you know, is the final plan for this dive is to get back to the top of the spire, and we will check our navigation position there and make sure to close the loop on our navigation to see if that still converges with where we dropped marker 16 at the start of the dive. That will allow us to get some feel for any drift in our navigation.
Okay, pilots, the ship moves continue another 30 meters, which should get you right to the spire. We can confirm our navigation route. We just continue uphill at 200 degrees.
And for those of you enjoying the view, we're sorry about the tedium of doing any navigation chores, but it just means you just have to look at the spire one more time before we go home tonight.
Got that tether away from that rock. Gonna slowly start moving in these piles. Roland, how's the camera? All right there. Nope. Over. All seems. That's right. Take this nice and slow.
What's interesting to note here, if you look through the shrimp, you can actually see when you can see the rocks behind, they're actually a dark bluish grey colour. You see yellow colours or everywhere else, that's almost certainly iron oxidizing, where it's gone, basically it's old and cold, and the grey is the fresher sulfide where there's still active fluid flow coming out. And then of course the shrimp themselves actually want to go where the active fluid flow is. Be an interesting hypothesis, you could stick a thermometer in there to see whether the dark grey rock is actually where the hottest fluid is. Maybe it's just a little bit too hot for the shrimp. But of course that's easy for me to say when we're just looking at it on video. Absolutely thousands of them. You can actually see crevices to left and right there, so basically all these different little cracks in the rock here where the fluid's coming out. It's probably just no real estate here these shrimp leave untouched. If there's anywhere they can live where they can make a living, and they're probably filling it, so
If the cracking stayed consistent,
who knows how much fluid flow we'd see if the shrimp weren't there. Stunning imagery.
looks like this is the shoulder. You guys see that just popped in stream on the left side? Looks like the J pad. We did find it a 4 point. There it is.
Some of the spots look like actual, no, not chimneys, but fluid coming out in quite like a funnel.
The bucket lid's just off to the left.
Yep.
This bucket lid spire.
Oh yeah, I'm just pushing over the shoulder there.
It's interesting. The water temperature here is about a half a degree warmer than it was elsewhere.
Oh yeah, sorry,
Says
you're doing a beauty shot.
isn't that gorgeous?
Will do.
Well, it's a real privilege to be sitting where I'm sitting right now, but I hope you're all enjoying it wherever you're watching this as well.
Be with you here in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. You got time. Hold. Close the spiral. Good. Alright. So Bobby, if you head off at 200 degrees, get in Sirius's view.
That was splendid, Chris.
John, okay, give me some game. John may have to come out with you. This guy's getting too close to him. Coming out very slowly right now. Very good. Okay. To the right there. Okay, good. That's fine. Yeah. Just maybe down for 3 minutes. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
There it is. There's Everest. So you're coming over it right now. I believe the ship is just slowing to stop right now. Yeah, I'm trying to set this up here. The big hole is right between me and it. I don't know if you really want to fly it over that without the diffuse flow coming out. Bridge now? Thank you, Bridge. Looks like our tracking is pretty good too. We'll return to the spire. Bridge, this is now. Come to the left side of it a little bit. Yeah, I'm sure you're listening, but we're just doing one final beauty shot up the spire, and then we'll continue on our ascent.
So as we see in Sirius, we're just approaching now. We're at 2296 meters. Vehicle's heading on
So Sirius is planning to swing right
to
over
the
the top
east,
of the spire.
and we're basically approaching the very top of the spire. You can't see it just yet. It's just coming into field of view. Some
Ship is stopped, but your pause still swings slowly at 200. That's good. Should. Alright, video. Hop right here with my camera. Again, let me see if I can push him a little bit closer to this guy. Yep. Pretty far below the bottom of the spire, but figure this will give us lots of distance to head out. How's that look right there? Alright, there you go.
So we are, we're at 2302 meters on a heading of 302, facing northwest, approaching the very summit of the Von Damm hydrothermal field. You can see our hydrothermal shrimp here. There's fluid flowing out from around where they're thriving over these yellow and brown stained massive sulfide deposits, or almost chimney-like structures. A few of these so-called rat-tailed fish in amongst the shrimp there. Some quite bright yellow discoloration on some of the sulfides, like over on the right-hand side of the field of view just now. I've been corrected. Not rat-tail fish, zooarcids. My apologies. The rock's definitely rock though, only it's not, it's sulfide.
Yeah, co-pilot, maybe you could come up a little. It looks like you guys got a tether. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable zooming either video or that's fine, no problem. Safety first.
And warm fluid up on the top right there.
Yeah, that's the spire I was talking. Just follow white patches up the entire round.
It's probably white's in the screen right now, dead ahead, top of the screen.
Well, actually, this is now.
Go ahead, Nav.
Hey, can I drop MCR 26 as the second time we come to this fire? Just to show we return to the same spot?
That would be excellent, yes please. Can you let me know when you drop that, and I'll put it in the event log as well.
Okay, it's done. Yeah, it looks like the current, as much as I tried, it looks like the current is taking me back towards it.
We are now at 2294 meters. So we've got about 2 more meters to go till we get to the shallowest point where we've seen anything. 2292 is the shallowest point we've seen so far on the whole program.
Actually, Chris, this has been really useful, just the last 10 minutes, to realise just how extensive it is.
Some interesting yellow-green discoloration in the minerals behind, on the right-hand side of that field of view there.
Just say you're doing it on purpose. Panning around.
Yeah, well, the ROV is now just passing through 2292 meters. Must be getting very close to the very tippy top. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's dive. Thank you very much for listening and paying attention. Temperatures 5.
Blind on both cameras. Temperature is 5 degrees. 6, 7. Alright. John, I'll start pulling up a little bit.